I am the world's worst hiker. I am slow, anxious, prone to migraines, klutzy, not at all athletic. The list goes on and on. Additionally, I am afraid of the woods. I am completely convinced that behind any given tree is a bear or a serial killer or the Blair Witch. I just hate hiking, and I have always hated hiking. Ever since I was 6 years old and my dad would carry me halfway up the mountain, I would get to the top and say, "When are you going to take me to New York City?" I'm not a very accomplished hiker, and I'm not very fast, but on more weekends than not, you'll find me about halfway up a mountain in the Adirondacks. So why do I do it? Why do I subject myself to this thing that I can't stand? Well, I found out that doing something you hate can actually be better than doing something that you love. We are surrounded by all sorts of advice on happiness. From Pinterest to the self-help section, there's all sorts of information about following your passion. Do what you love, they say, and you'll never work a day in your life. I think this is awful advice. You know what I love? I really enjoy drinking wine in the shower. I love holding baby animals. I love going to all-inclusive resorts. And I love sitting on Reddit for 6 straight hours. So you see what the problem is? If I do what I love, I'm never going to accomplish anything, and I'm going to be a pretty boring person. Sounds like the physical embodiment of a BuzzFeed article. So there's this author, Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and she also more recently wrote a book called Big Magic. And in that book, she says, fear is boring. And I'd like to steal that and change it to say that happiness is boring. But you know what's not boring? Misery, hate, loathing. These are some exciting emotions, and that's why reality TV is so popular. You see, by doing things you hate, that's how you can really accomplish things. I found this out on a particular hike earlier this year when I went up Algonquin Mountain, which is the second highest peak in New York State, with a couple of my friends. And it started out, it was a little bit overcast, it was a little bit chilly, and it was a little bit breezy. So we start off on this hike, and as we get farther and farther along, it keeps getting colder, and it keeps getting windier, and finally it begins to rain. And about 2/3 of the way up this mountain, there's a sign. And if you've been up Algonquin, you probably remember this sign because it says, "Weather conditions change rapidly beyond this point. Don't proceed if you don't have the proper gear. Turn around." So this is when we realized maybe this is going to be a little bit tough. And we did have the proper gear, so we kept going. And as we get closer and closer to the summit, it's raining harder and harder. And finally, we do get to the top, and it's snowing. And there are the little breeze that we felt down at the trailhead has become 60-mile-an-hour winds. This is in June, by the way. And Algonquin is supposed to have these absolutely spectacular views. It's an exposed summit, and you're supposed to be able to see the wilderness all around you and all these other high peaks. But on the day that I was there, you couldn't see anything except the rock that you were clinging to. So, needless to say, I was pretty miserable. I'm getting pelted in the face with snow. My hands are freezing despite being inside gloves, and I am legitimately concerned that I might slip and fall off this mountain. But at the same time, I also had this stupid, ridiculous grin on my face. Because even though I really hated that slog up the mountain, I was feeling something that was actually better than happiness. The feeling of accomplishment and pride in myself that I was able to do this was just incredible. And I felt way more alive than I ever have drinking wine in the shower. So to accomplish great things, you do have to do some things that are uncomfortable, and there will be a point when you may hate it. One of my best friends in the world is 26 years old, and she's a surgeon. I've watched her for the past 5 or 6 years go through this incredible process with this singular goal of becoming a doctor and now a surgeon. And she works these crazy hours. She works like 80 hours a week. She's been in school forever, and she's under an incredible amount of stress. And when I was writing this talk, I asked her, do you always love it? And she said, no, of course I don't. There are days when I think, what the hell am I doing here? But it's worth it for her. She can't imagine herself anywhere else. And even though she is under this incredible amount of stress, and even though she had to move to Texas for her residency, and she has had to miss holidays and vacations because she's working at the hospital, it's worth it, even though she hates it sometimes. There's this phrase that's used a lot in the self-help world, and it originated with the Navy SEALs. And the phrase is, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I hate this phrase. I just cannot relate to it at all. Maybe that works for you if you're a Navy SEAL, but I am a soft, squishy civilian, and I will never be comfortable being uncomfortable. I will always hate it. And I think that phrases like this make it seem like the only people who can accomplish things are people who relish in suffering. And you don't have to like being uncomfortable to accomplish great things. What I think about when I hear get comfortable being uncomfortable is this expedition earlier this year. There were these 2 professional mountaineers, Adrian Ballinger and Corey Richards, who Snapchatted their ascent of Everest. And when they were on this trip, there was this one particular day when they're at the highest camp on Everest, and it's extremely dangerous up there. Any wrong decision and you will die. And they're there, just the 2 of them in their tent, and it's the middle of the night, and they're awoken because the snow has been blown and collapsed aside of their tent. So they have to get out of it in the middle of the night. It's 50 degrees below zero, and they have to shovel out the side of their tent. And not only do they pause to Snapchat this occasion, they also are laughing in the Snapchat. And that is just something that is totally unrelatable to me. When I was watching this at home, I was thinking, no way, man. I would be crying in the corner. There is no way that I would ever be laughing in a situation like this. These are people who are comfortable being uncomfortable, and they are on a different planet from me. But the thing is, even though I don't expect to ever find myself at the highest camp on Everest, accomplishing great things is not reserved for maniacs with no sense of self-preservation. Scared people get to accomplish things too. There's this quote from Georgia O'Keeffe in which she says, "I have been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it stop me from doing a single thing I wanted to do." Isn't that great? It's okay to be scared. It's okay to cry, and it's okay to regret ever saying that you wanted to do it, and it's okay to hate it. But you cannot quit. Because finishing the thing that you hate and finishing something that's really difficult, that's how you get to the good stuff. That's how you get to those feelings that are better than happiness, and that's how you accomplish great things. One time that comes to mind for me is another hike that I was on this summer with some friends who are in much better shape than I am. And the day started out beautifully. It was a clear day. It was the middle of summer. The birds were singing. What could go wrong, right? And as we're going along, things are going really well. I'm feeling good. And we keep climbing and climbing and climbing, and it keeps getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And by the time we finally get to the top of the mountain, my legs are already shaking. They are so tired. And if you know anything about hiking, you know that getting to the top is only halfway there. And to top things off, I begin to get a migraine at the top of this mountain. So we start coming down, we start descending on this route that's different than the one that we took up. And the one that we take down is not as well maintained. It's narrow, it's got a lot of loose rocks on it. It's just basically a miserable route. And so I feel like my head is pounding, not really too happy anymore, and 13 miles into this hike, I fall on my shaky legs and smack myself in the face with a trekking pole and give myself a black eye. So in addition to the migraine and being exhausted and everything else, I'm now also embarrassed and slightly concerned that I've just blinded myself. So at that moment, I've never wanted to quit something so badly in my life. All I could think was, I am so done hiking, I am never going into nature again, I'm staying in my bed forever, and I just want to quit. I just want to go home. But the thing is, at that moment, I really only had two choices. I could die on the mountain, or I could get up and keep walking and get back to the car and go get lunch. So, as evidenced by the fact that I'm here and not living in the wilderness, I did get up and I carried myself on my own 2 feet back to the car, which was an additional 5 miles from where we were. And there were points when I was not entirely convinced that I could take another step. It was totally brutal, mostly for my friends because they were stuck with me. And when I got back to the car, something funny happened. When I got into the air conditioning and finally sat down, all that loathing and misery that I was feeling, it instantly evaporated. And in its place was this feeling that was just totally overwhelming of awe and thankfulness and pride. Because I honestly wasn't sure if I'd be able to carry myself 18 miles over rough terrain when I was exhausted and in pain. But I did. And that feeling has gotten me back out hiking again, even after I swore I would never do it again. So if you're willing to give it a try, I do have 3 recommendations for you if you're going to attempt something that you hate. First, make a list of things that you cannot stand. Mine looks like this: being in nature, writing, public speaking, and watching any movie that's over an hour and a half in length. Maybe yours includes a fear of heights and traveling without an itinerary. But whatever it is, off of that list of things that you cannot stand, choose something that scares you, or is difficult, or that you're just not good at, and commit to trying it. Now, don't choose something that's going to make you miserable just for misery's sake, but choose something that seems impossible to you. And once you do that, commit to it. Make it really, really, really hard to quit, because at some point, you're probably going to try to quit. I know that I've been 90% of the way to a summit before and tried to quit. And the reason that I love climbing mountains for this purpose is that once you're 90% of the way there, quitting is almost exactly the same as finishing, except you don't get to say that you made it. So make it hard for yourself to quit. Put down a deposit, book your airfare, tell everyone that you know, put some money on the line, but don't give yourself an escape hatch, because you have to finish it. And finally, start before you're ready. Now, I'm not saying go unprepared. Don't be that guy who's on top of the mountain in a rain poncho from Walmart in the middle of winter. Make necessary preparations, but trust in yourself. You're never going to feel entirely ready to do something that's uncomfortable, and you're never going to want to start something that you know you're going to hate. So start before you're ready, and trust in yourself and your ability to solve problems and your ability to overcome adversity. So in the interest of putting my money where my mouth is, I will be going next summer on a mountaineering trip to Washington State. It's a week-long course involving sleeping in tents and learning how to ice climb and carrying a 50-pound pack up a 10,000-foot peak. I'm going to hate it. It's going to be so awful. But the thing is, the thing that keeps me from backing out and the thing that keeps me going when it's 20 degrees out and I'm running up the stairs at RPI is this image that I have of myself. I can see it. Me on top of Mount Baker, ice axe in hand, like a total badass. And knowing what I know now, that feeling of accomplishment is going to be unlike anything that I've ever felt before. So do things you hate, because there are feelings that are better than happiness. And do things you hate because you will surprise yourself with what you can accomplish. And do things you hate because one day, when you're walking through a snow-covered forest and there's no one else around, and even though you are still convinced that the serial-killing Blair Witch Bear is out there, you may just find that the thing you hate has become the thing you love. Thank you.